Have you ever wondered how we can trust Paul? Has someone ever quoted Paul and you wondered how he had his authority? Let me share with you an experience. One day, my brother, two friends, and I were at a Mexican restaurant after church. We started to fill up on chips and salsa, and we started talking about theology before long. And we started quoting Paul and saying stuff like, Paul said this and Paul said that. And I didn't think much of it. We'd used language like this before. Well, later on, after we'd gotten home, my brother and I were discussing video ideas, and I told him about my video idea, this one, about how we can trust Paul. And he told me about how, during that conversation at the Mexican restaurant, he was thinking about how we were quoting Paul, and he was thinking about how we can trust Paul. And I've dealt with similar things like this before. You know, you have the New Testament writers, like the apostles, who knew Jesus Christ himself, and you have Paul, who came after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. So how can you trust him? Well, I decided to do some research, and I've compiled some reasons on why you can trust Paul's message as reliable and divinely inspired by God. And stay tuned, because I believe that the last two reasons are by far the strongest. Reason 1, internal consistency. The first reason is that Paul does not contradict other parts of the Bible. Paul's central message, such as his mission to the Gentiles, Jesus being raised from the dead, justification by faith alone apart from the works of the law, salvation by faith, Jesus fulfilling the law, and good works being evidence of salvation. Paul's core message does not contradict or change the message of Jesus, but he clarifies it. Paul wrote to early Christian communities and had to clarify the true message of Jesus against Christians falling into sin, like in the Corinthians, and had early heresy groups like the Judaizers in Galatians and Proto-Gnostics that he had to deal with. The early church needed correction and clarification about God's law and his gospel, and through the revelation of God, he clarified and expanded upon the meaning of the cross. Reason 2, God's providence. 2 Peter 1 verse 3 and 2 Timothy 3, 16 through 17 show that all scripture is helpful and God-breathed. If something as vital as most of the New Testament, which Paul wrote, was false or not a revelation from God, what does that say about God's power to protect and preserve his scripture and message? God preserved his word through spirit-guided recognition of the church. Reason 3, Paul's calling. Acts chapter 9 verse 3 through 6 tells the story of Jesus stopping the murderous Saul on the road to Damascus and changing him into the missionary Paul. We see that in Acts, being a reliable source and scripture, that Paul got his calling from Jesus Christ himself. But there's more, you see. In the next three verses, it shows that there were witnesses to Paul's miraculous encounter. This is not Paul saying, "Ayo, just trust me, bro." No, he has men that were speechless to his miraculous encounter. And finally, reason 4, apostolic confirmation. In many places, the apostles spent time and confirmed Paul's message. In Galatians chapter 1, verse 18 through 20, Paul meets Peter and James. In Galatians 2, verse 1 through 9, the apostles recognized Paul's gospel as authentic. In Acts 15, verse 7 through 11, Peter affirms the same gospel that Paul preaches. In 2 Peter 3, verse 15 through 16, Peter calls Paul's letters scripture. If the people that Jesus called himself to be disciples can trust Paul, I think we can too. An honorable mention that would go along with this section is how the early church father Irenaeus said that if you reject Paul, you reject the truth. Irenaeus was a disciple of Polycarp, who was a disciple of John the Beloved, who, of course, was a disciple of Jesus Christ. He was only one generation removed from the apostolic age, and he was already saying that Paul was a reliable source. As we see in today's video, Paul's message is reliable because his message lines up with Scripture, God's faithfulness and sovereignty. Paul received his calling from Jesus Christ himself, and the early apostles and disciples recognized Paul's message as true. We see that Paul's gospel can be accepted and trusted as a true revelation from God.